Hello, Greg. How about now? All right. We'll give people a minute or two to join. If you've not already skimmed the notes at the notes page attached to the meeting, now would be a good time to do so. Remember that our session is being recorded and will get pushed to YouTube. We do have another fullish agenda, but it's at least not as full as the last meeting. I think we'll be able to take this at a more studied pace. Oh, we'll go ahead and get started. I have out of band heard regrets from both Russ and Jay. Liz, if you just go ahead and capture that they sent regrets. So I'd like to start off with asking if there are any tooling aspects for preparation for IETF 113 that aren't covered in the notes that we already have, the things that we're already going to be talking about. If there's anybody that knows that there is something coming that we're going to need to make a press to get into for 113, knowing as early as possible would be better. I know there's been a discussion on the lists for getting the important dates for when draft submissions reopen into the data tracker. I have taken a look at that. I really don't think it's the right thing to do to shove that in for 113. I think we should do it correctly before we get to 114. I could hack it in, but it would be quite a hack to do so.
Hey, Robert,
Go ahead.
I was just going to note that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, do you hear me?
I hear you.
I was just going to note that we're going to put that on the telechat for this Thursday for the ISG to review as suggested and get it in the queue for 114. So no rush.
Cool.
The only thing I heard of is from the Secretariat or MeetEcho that they would maybe want to know which working groups don't have a chair physically present in Vienna, because they want to give those groups some additional in-person help in the room. So this is either a tool thing or a registration system thing.
So Lars, on this one, as we briefly discussed earlier in our European Day, I updated this website using...
Oh, okay, you're fast.
Yeah, hey, we are software engineer, right? So you know how easy it is to do. So I just paste the link there again, and there are at least a few working groups where there is no representative, and many of them no people in person. That's not too good.
So remind
That was
me,
great.
if anybody knows, I'll talk with Alex if nobody here remembers off the top of their head, but is there anything special we have to do to support groups that have substitute chairs because no chairs are available? Nobody's jumping
The
in.
main
I'll double
question, I
check.
think, was
So,
the main question is basically to give access to the people, the delegate, easy access to the queue management. But I think we talked about this before, right?
Yeah,
Um,
we have to identify the delegate ahead of time, I guess, is one of the questions that I had, because I'm anticipating being asked.
Robert, this is Greg. I mean, this is something we can definitely talk about, but my conversations with Alessandro, and I think we should ask him this directly, is that the expectation is that the remote chairs will be able to manage the queue in Meetecho just as if they were in person, and the expectation
Sure.
of in-person chairs.
That's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking about meetings where, for whatever reason, none of the group's chairs can actually be there to drive the meeting, remote or in person.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't understand when you said there. I thought you meant. So the idea is that there would be just to make sure I understand, in case it comes up on one of the Meetecho sessions, the cases where the group is meeting, but none of the designated chairs are expected to be participating in that meeting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and start moving forward through the agenda. We have one potential, we actually have an RFC in the, I've forgotten what TI expands to, but essentially waiting for tooling state. Tool issue, okay. Kasari, all right, this is, I think, the first time we've seen something go into TI. This means that there is an RFC that can't be published until this issue is resolved. So it is something that we should treat as a critical issue for the project.
I think at this point we're waiting on feedback from Sandy and John about proceeding. So it's not really, I think Kasar's offered the option, and now it's like, do we take the option or publish as is? Like
Okay.
at what point are the PDF page breaks that bad? This one just seemed more egregious than usual. So I think that's why John was seeking a fix.
So let us know. For the rest of you who haven't read the issue, we've got some shortcomings with Wheezy Print and how much control we have over how it chooses to break pages when there are sections of content that it thinks are an unbreakable block. And in this particular RFC, it did some unpleasant looking things with some nested section titles before a large chunk of text. And we found hackish workarounds that are currently being considered as one way that we can work around the shortcoming of Wheezy Print. For the preparation of the new server and the move to the mailing lists, I think we'll take these as read unless anyone has any questions. From my discussions with Glenn, we should be in a spot where the dev team will start assisting with testing of the new server shortly after 1.13, as it says here, and we'll work to have resources available to do so. Our subversion and track conversion to GitHub project with Ribose is essentially done at this point. We're now to the point where Ribose is supporting us in cleaning up rough edge cases that we're finding, and we're not finding the rough edge cases so much anymore. The biggest issue that we found was actually an issue in the 2 track instances that we had for XML to RFC and for IETF-DB, which had the data tracker and mail archive in it, where we lost, and I mean completely lost, ticket attachments from the first half of 2021. We'll flag the issues where those things happened and go back to the people that provided the original attachments if we need to get them back, try to get them to recreate them. There is a follow-on activity where we are working in repositories at GitHub to convert them to work as we are planning to work going forward in GitHub, more than the point where we can cut releases from them and change the requirements on them to use the style of contribution mechanisms that we're expecting people to use as they suggest code that we add. That's going to be coming fast and furious over the next couple of weeks. What you saw happen with XML to RFC was a pretty good prototype for what you're going to see with the data tracker and mail archive. Any questions on this one? I didn't capture it here because these things, both of these repositories are now, they've moved. There are all kinds of places where we have pointers, including inside the data tracker itself, to how do you report bugs. And these are all going to change to open a GitHub issue at the appropriate repository. As we discover these things, we should change them or make notes that we need to have them changed if it's not something that the person that has seen it can just go change. I'm going to move on to moving services off tools.ietf.org. As before, the long pole in this is the bibxml service. You can see from the links that we have in the section below on the bibxml service that there are quite a few remaining issues that Ribos is working on fixing for us. I started adapting their deployment instructions, which are rather generic, to our specific deployment environment so that we can queue up an actual deployment of the service on our infrastructure. I'm expecting that to happen. I do not at this point think that we'll have that deployment in place before this IETF meeting. It will likely come after, which means that our ultimate shutdown of tools.ietf.org, basically undelegating and setting up redirections for the domain, is not going to take place until that time frame. Everything else is pretty much ready to go. I still need to build the final set of redirects, and we are anticipating that we'll make the transition without having an immediate replacement for BAP or Daily Dose. Those will both be projects that we will pursue as schedule permits, but later. I think that covers both of those topics. Does anybody have any questions? I saw in the chat that Google is now starting to pick up the data tracker when searching for RFCs, which is, nice that it's not landing on tools.ietf.org at this point. But as we were mentioning in our scheduling session for workshops, when we put pressure on the search engines, that might not be exactly where we want RFC searches to land. We'll see. Alexa, you want to talk about Zulip?
Or Lee?
We are ready to allow working groups to sign up for a Zulip stream, and we're going to announce that availability later today. The working groups that get back to us by next Tuesday, we are going to do our very best to make sure that their Zulip stream is enabled for IETF 113. And then the plan is that after the meeting, we will go through the remaining working groups and actually just create streams for all of them so that working groups have them by default. That's basically it.
I haven't looked at the PR that you put in for the service plan. Does it tell people how to request things from the Secretariat?
Oh, no, my apologies. I didn't realize that was, I can add that in there. We're just probably, and in the email, of course, we're going to want people to just send a ticket, I think, in to support, and then we'll
To
take it
support,
from
yeah.
there. Yeah, and we'll
It's
put
fine.
something maybe.
It's fine for that to just be in the announcement. It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
The service plan. I was just wanting to make sure that it was prominent somewhere.
Yep, absolutely.
Any questions about Zulip? Greg and Eric, would anything that you'd like to add to what's been written about web analytics?
This is great. Just I see the question from Eric in there, and it's something that I've had a couple of discussions about, and Eric, except for Eric and I haven't discussed it, so I probably need to connect with you, Eric, and sort that out.
I do think it might be good to remind people on the team in general that the agreement that we made with the community was the detailed analytics wouldn't be available to anybody that wasn't on, core operations, limited set of people. But the reports that come out of it that anonymize the data could be made more widely available. And we're anticipating that, generally speaking, for issues like this, where the Yang catalog stakeholders want to get some insight into the analytics, it will be through periodic reports that are extracted from the service. Last week we
And
had a
at least at the beginning, they could be sent over email, right, to some specific participants. Make it simple.
Yeah, we'll work out the details. All right, last week we had a coordination call for upcoming workshops. I basically pasted what my summary of the call was into the notes. We'll take those as read. We still have looming finishing the integration of the data tracker into our Wiki.js instances. Some progress was made on that, but it's thoroughly behind projects like getting the data, moving the data tracker and mail archive into GitHub. I hope that we'll see progress on that in the next month, but it may slip a little bit beyond that. We'll see. This is probably a good place for me to interject that I am beginning to see a plan for what to do with the track instances that we eventually move out of. So we've already, assuming we're running no hitches, are out of track for the data tracker and XML RFC. I'm planning on creating Docker containers that contain working instances of those track and subversion repositories that we post as GitHub packages. Anybody can pull them down and dig around in them locally if they want to, if they need to look at them as historic artifacts, but make it where we're no longer serving them from .ietf.org, track.ietf.org in particular. And this starts us down the long tail for being able to turn track.ietf.org off. There are several working group wikis in there that are, where the plan is more than working group wikis in there where the plan is to crowdsource moving their content into Wiki.js. Once that content is moved, I would create similar packages for the track instance that's been moved out of, so that the .ietf.org service of track can eventually be shut completely down. Kasara, would you do you have anything to add? What went into the notes here for Author Tools of the Wagtail website? Nope, you're not coming through.
Nothing more to add on both projects. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're very faint, but we can hear you now.
So I don't have anything more to add on both projects. The Author Tools production deployment is ready in a way. Like we have a test, we have a instance running on a development like a production like box. It's just matter of redirecting Author Tools to that one.
So we need to coordinate with Glenn when to make that final cutover. So let's start an email exchange about when to work that in, given the other things that are underway. Anybody have any questions about either the Author Tools site or the primary website? Greg, do you want to add anything to the way the Common Bootstrap thing? Yeah. So we have been testing this against the data tracker's facelift branch. I'll talk more about the facelift branch in a moment. Have found some questions that we're going to take back to Springload about the way they created the NPM. There's some internal references that we think are probably not done the best way that they could be done, and could be adjusted to make the package a little easier to use. But we'll see how that goes as we talk with them. For the data tracker, note that we have one release really between the last tools call and this one, because we were focusing heavily on getting ready for this GitHub transition. Our future releases are going to change what releases look like, both from a deployment point of view and for what things like the release notes look like. We're adjusting our development procedures to follow semantic versioning more closely. In the interim between the last meeting and this, we did have to make a few adjustments to Cloudflare. Some of the most surprising ones were that many attempts to submit internet drafts were being blocked by Cloudflare, and Cloudflare saw them as attempts to upload cross-site scripting and XML insertion attacks and many other things of that nature. And I basically had to disable the entire web application firewall for the submit endpoint and the API endpoint. We can take a look later at turning it back, turning pieces of it back on, but that's going to be a long and slow process as we identify the rules that don't result in a ridiculously large number of false positive blocks. And we also need to look at how to make the block experience better for people who are using the submit tool, either the web interface or in particular the API endpoint. We had a couple of valid operational vulnerability reports. One of them we addressed already. We had a report that it was fairly easy to, if you were able to get your hands on a password reset link because of shared access network terminals or whatever, because of the length of their validity, even after they were used, we were exposing people to at least nuisance abuse. So we modified the behavior of the password reset endpoint to time out much more quickly and to also become invalid once anything had happened that changed the conditions for which the password reset, under which the password reset request was made.
But at least people were contacting you through the vulnerability report contact, which is quite a good
Yes.
news, right?
Yeah, the signal to noise ratio there is terrible. We have about 80% spam, 20% people telling us that, oh my goodness, you're exposing all of these internet drafts. And no, really. And but a couple that came through valid. We have a second valid one in here that is still related to the reset mechanism that we'll be doing work on over this next cycle. That is I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's related to rate limiting requests. So, and that is going to apply generally to a lot of places where we have the data tracker do stuff based on being poked, where rate limiting might make more sense. We have still the upcoming work on the data tracker, one of which was complete as of this morning. The data tracker is being served using Nginx and GUnicorn as the web stack, as opposed to Apache and ModWSGI. That transition went fairly smoothly. We're watching the results fairly closely. As anticipated, there's not a huge difference from the outside world's point of view at this time, other than just a slight speed up. And it's a very slight speed up, wasn't quite as much as I'd hoped. But I'm anticipating that this will give us a better performance profile as we go through the actual IETF meeting. As I mentioned before, auth is still being served on Apache. We're planning on leaving it that way through the meeting, but post-meeting we'll move auth onto Nginx, GUnicorn as well. The two big pieces of upcoming data tracker work that we want to focus on are capturing session attendance more correctly so that we have the ability to correctly compute the set of people that are non-com eligible. And finishing, really restarting the work on making all of our timestamps time zone aware, and doing finishing a major facelift effort that Lars started on removing our dependencies on Bootstrap 3 and a lot of other fairly old packages, moving to Bootstrap 5. I'm hoping by the end of the day today, if not sometime early tomorrow, to have a test instance of the Bootstrap 5 branch up available on the sandbox so that people can start seeing what the new face is going to look like. And we're anticipating that that's what development will take place against at the upcoming code sprint at IETF 113. Kasara, anything else to talk about with XML to RFC? Anything you want to highlight in particular? Yeah, audio's not coming through again, I'm sorry. Too many mute buttons.
All right. So yeah, I don't have anything to add apart from reminding you all that XML to RFC is on GitHub, and you can open issues there.
Ryan, anything that you want to add to mail archive and the registration system?
So on
Right.
XML, I have a question. Sorry for taking so long to unmute. So we have some 135 tickets, and I'm wondering what is going to be the velocity we are going to achieve there. I mean, clearly you cannot.
So there's, yeah, I hope you understand that many of those tickets are effectively blocked on us finally navigating whatever it is with the 799 star BIS process. So as the tools team, we can't just arbitrarily decide to go do things that are changes to the vocabulary. We have ostensibly this TMC's authority to make some changes. It looks like we've been making some good progress there that's going to lead to changes in the BIS documents that we can then make changes in the code. But in particular, we're waiting for some authoritative declaration of what the grammar changes are going to be as we renormalize the grammar to deal with, you know, what inlines can land inside what blocks, so that that's more universally normalized, and things like that. So these things have not been languishing from a lack of resource perspective, coder resource perspective, as much as they have getting answers to, you know, what it is that the code should actually go do,
Yep.
based on some process that is something other than someone like me arbitrarily deciding that this is what it's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, since we are on GitHub, it might be useful to have some labels for the state that these tickets are in, but because right now it's really daunting, and knowing some of this is waiting on 791 bis, some of this is waiting on understanding the problem in the first place, and so on. So people could maybe focus on contributing more to those where we are still trying to understand problem, and so on.
And we had some labeling inside track. I will go look and see how well that translated into labels on the tickets. I think we had a waiting label. We'll make sure that it got used appropriately for the XML to RFC project. So,
Thank you.
okay, Ryan, now we're back to you.
Yeah, not much to report really. What I've been working on is changes to the red system for the hybrid meeting. And it's mostly back-end stuff for the staff and changes to reports and handling that and such.
So I guess the thing that I would add is that Mail Archive did just move to GitHub, and you know, Ryan and the dev team will be getting together over the next few days to walk through what the changes to the way development and release will happen from that repository. Eric, anything you want to add about what's happening with Yang Catalog?
Yeah, not really. I mean, Pantheon is executing on the new feature stuff, so that's good. The big one is I wrote is about this Yang extension for schema ID. So, and Carsten knows about it. He's part of the design team, let's say.
All right. So, as we mentioned last month, we have the data tracker security review report from ZX. Since last month, after further conversations with Jay, we were thinking we will go ahead and have them retest. And I'm talking to them about the scheduling for the retest. And that will result in an updated report. Will be a little bit easier for us to frame when we publish it. We started work with Serious Open Source on reviewing our database systems, focusing first on the data tracker. As part of that, we re-enabled the performance schema on the production machine. I was watching fairly closely. It had a measurable but nearly negligible effect on the overall processing time, at least from the data tracker's perspective. We are still talking with ZX about doing a penetration testing security review of the most of the remaining web services running on IETFA. We've been refining the statement of work for that. We need to work through the timing of their reviews versus the move to the refresh of IETFA. There's we don't want them to be in the middle of testing when that move happens, and there's reasonable question about how much of their testing would be invalidated if it were done on the older system. So we're working that out with them. We're currently on their schedule for April. We may need to push that back into at least May, and as we figure out what the cutover for IETFA is really going to look like. So our transition to Mailman 3 is of course behind the transition to the new server, so no real action this period. We've been resource starved on exploring Mailman 3 on the sandbox. I suspect we'll remain resource starved on that for this upcoming period. We've been preparing for the RFC editor model transition. Should it go through in roughly the shape that the draft that is going through the approval processes at the moment lands, it's going to be fairly easy and quick to add the groups, set up roles in the groups, and shut down the groups that are shut down by those docs. So the presence for those groups will appear fairly quickly. It will then take a little bit of time to do things like add balloting for the RSAB. We've got that, we know how to do that. It's just some lifting that will have to be done.
Yeah, Robert, one question, but how do these groups hang in the hierarchy? Are they their own top level, or?
So I think what I'm going to do after discussions, I started discussions of this with several people a little bit earlier, is I'm going to repurpose the existing RSC editor group to be a top level group, and not really have any members, no roles. It will be a container that will contain the RSWAG, RSAB, and RPC as children, and that will be the mechanism where they hang under the menus as things under this group are all grouped together. So
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess we don't do a whole lot of roles, but we basically ask the tickets, the changes we want to do, like appoint chairs for yours, WG, and so on. Correct?
getting to add the chairs, I think you would send a support ticket, because that's work that the secretariat would do, just operating groups.
That makes sense. I don't expect us to need a lot of these, and so I think it makes sense to just do this with tickets. So the tooling effort is reduced. But that sounds good. Thanks.
Yep. This gets us to open discussion and any other business. I see that Greg has added an other business item. Anybody have anything else that they want to add? All right, Greg, you want to introduce the...
Yeah, sure. I just updated the text there to hopefully make the topic a little bit more well defined. So I just discovered this week that when you're on a group's about page in Data Tracker and you click on the link to go to the Jabber log for that group, that you're actually redirected to this page on the www site, which talks about group chat in general. And then from that page, it's possible to get to an index page of all Jabber logs, but it's not currently obvious. Anyway, this I don't recall. Well, this was sort of unexpected for me, and I don't recall. Couldn't find any discussion about the redirect, so I wanted to see if it was something that people had some history on, if it's still the currently desired behavior, and or if there's a way we ought to make the direct links to the Jabber logs more visible. So really just...
So my big recollection of this, and Glenn, question's going to be coming to you pretty quick about if you can identify where the request to put the redirects to the /meeting/group chat took place and why. My vague recollection of this was that we wanted to have a way for people who were jumping into those logs to note that they were under note well. And that the implementation was that these links took you to the group chat page so that you could read about what the heck these logs were all about, and from there you could jump back out into the logs. And the question now is that really what, hey, am I remembering correctly, is that really what we want? Or do we want to just go fix these redirects so that the links from the data tracker so that when you click on them, you just land in the logs?
Can we present the logs in a way that make it clear in the framing that they are under note well? I mean, I think at the moment, if I remember correctly, we just dump people in the raw text log, right?
That's correct. As Liz is capturing what I just said, I do want to reemphasize that this is what I vaguely remember, and I'm happy for somebody to stand up and say, no, you're making that up.
Robert, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just doing tactical checking of this, and I do see the same thing that Greg sees. It looks like the links from the data tracker are just missing a piece.
Yeah, they could be adjusted to point directly into the logs. So
it's like they appear to be, but they're missing a segment. They're missing a path in the URI, and they're getting like an error redirect. Like a missing redirect back to the www page that Greg was referring to. So just adding /Jabber at the front of the path portion appears to be...
That's jumping forward to the, that's jumping past the why is it currently this way.
Oh, yeah.
So that's good information if the redirect is purely a 404 style redirect as opposed to an intentional redirect that went in and said find everything that is on this path and redirect it to this page. That points more to this just being a mistake instead of a policy thing.
Just as maybe a data point to reinforce that idea is that I note that the link to the mail archive, mailing list archive, just goes to the mail archive itself without anything indicating note well on the way there.
I don't know if I should waste time on this now, but just checking config. It looks like the web server config is doing just a regular group 404 type redirect. It expects everything to be in /jabber/logs. And anything that goes to the jabber.ietf.org that's not in that subdirectory gets redirected out.
Yeah. Given that piece of information, I think we just go change the data tracker to point to the right things. I noticed Lars' picture has went away. I don't know if... he's still here, good. Of course, double mutes. You're talking as Lars, but we can't hear you.
First of the two mute buttons. Yeah, the Firefox crashed on me, and it crashed the mail archive to check, and yeah, there's nothing there about not well either, so that I don't see a huge reason to, reflect that. I would suspect that everybody looking at them and Jabberlogs knows that they are contributions to the IETF like the email.
Okay. No, we'll just go, a lot of an issue to just go change where the data tracker points.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to do something different, we could also just load it with an iframe under datatracker.org and put something there. Put a new template there. But
All right.
fixing the redirects, I guess.
Anybody have anything else that they want to discuss today?
Do we know who will be in Vienna for the code sprint? Roughly.
I haven't done a poll.
Okay.
At the moment, the people that I know of who are expected to be there, unless travel disrupts them badly, are Ryan and Kasara and you. So, and I would argue that that's enough.
And I should be there as well.
Awesome.
Okay, so we have a few people, and we're gonna find a table and
Yeah.
sit there. Okay.
I will be remote. So, I'm still working out whether or not I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I may not join until 6 o'clock in the morning my time. So, a couple of hours in. Yeah. So.
I hope, though, that you will not mind if we drink a beer when it's 10 a.m. your time.
That I have no problem. I'm going to do my best to shift to that time zone, but the 4 a.m. thing is always a little bit rough. So
I fully understand that.
The only other thing I have is it's great to see stuff on GitHub, specifically the data tracker. I think that was a huge lift, and it's gonna make so many things easier. I'm already excited about using git diff instead of git merge instead of svn merge, which is a pain. So this is excellent work. Thank you guys.
It's going to be pretty exciting. So before we jump off the call, I'd like to talk about our next one. as it currently stands, it falls 2 weeks after the IETF, I believe. Do we want to hold that? Reserve that time and see if there's a pressing need to talk, or where there was a time before we were all working mostly remote where people were taking a pretty big break right after that spring IETF in particular. Do we know? I'll ask it this way: are there people who know they would not make the call as it's currently scheduled next time around?
It will be 3 weeks after the IETF, right?
Okay.
It's April 12th. It's the Easter week. For those of you who have that holiday.
Is it? No. Easter is on the 17th in my calendar. I can be wrong though.
Yeah, but this is on the 12th, so it's the week before Easter. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's the 12th, which is the Tuesday, and then on the Sunday is Easter. So some countries have already school holidays and stuff.
Yeah, that's spring break for me. I'm not in any way essential, but I will be gone because it's spring break for us.
No, I think we will have some things to coordinate if we haven't coordinated them offline, including talking about when we would be making the cutover to the new refreshed IETFA server. So let's go ahead and leave that scheduled, and we can adjust it as we get closer if we discover that it makes sense to do so. All right. Thanks everybody for their time today, and we'll see you during IETF 113.